my dears, I came up with a fun idea of making an autistic-coded Broadway character medley because Broadway, fun fact, is one of the most common special interests for autistic people, and combining Broadway and autism would be fun and funky. We'll get into why that special interest is a thing in a hot second. But I realized that a surprising amount of our favorite Broadway characters are, in fact, very autistic-coded, and they got me wondering, well, why? And before we get into all things theater, for friends who need it, audio description, I am a white person in my early 20s with brownish blondish hair that is curly and kind of frizzy and all over the place. I am wearing a gray sweater, dark gray sweater, because I'm really cold, and you can see a green collar popping up out of the top, and there's a bookshelf and photos behind me. So let's start with the why of theater. Why are autistic people so attracted to theater, and why is this such a common special interest for us? There are a couple reasons, other than the fact that every lead character is autistic. We'll get there. That I think that we tend to love theater, and often specifically musicals, so much. The first is the structure of theater itself. In the theater building, the social norms are very clear. You go to the place, you sit down, you watch the thing, you get up and you leave the place, and then you talk about what you liked and what you did not like from the thing that you saw. And also sometimes you get a hot pretzel or a chocolate chip cookie somewhere in there. So that's really great. And it's also a way that you can spend time with other people without the panic of doing social things right, much like how autistic people like to watch movies with people. It's basically connection without the social pressure. It's also great because you get to learn from the social interactions of others without having to put yourself through the exhaustion of a social interaction. You get to observe people having conversations, making choices, doing life things, and you can learn from their mistakes and from their wins and the things that worked for them and the things that didn't. You don't have to figure out what chess move to do next in a conversation and deal with the panic of being in the situation. You get to see each movement happen in front of you while you're one step removed and then learn from it. And that's personally how I studied people and learned conversations, was through theater and TV. Also, by definition, theater is campy and over the top. The emotions are not just shown through micro, tiny facial expressions because it's a theater, and in the case of most big box musicals, you're probably really far from the stage, so they learn to put those emotions into their physicality and into the way that they speak in a more over-the-top way than people do in real life, which means that if you have a hard time recognizing emotions and whatever, it's really easy to follow what's going on. And it's very clear what emotions people are feeling, and so you don't have to do as much guesswork, which then adds to the understanding of other people and feelings and conversations and social interactions in real life afterwards. Characters are also, well, they're characters. They're usually archetypes, or a combination of a small handful of archetypes, but archetypes. But it's often easy to tell the good guy from the bad guy, or in the case of Waitress, for example, the guy you really hate, the ones that you really love, and the ones that you really love, but you know that they did some bad things, but humans are multifaceted and it's gray and that's okay and normal, but that's still easy to understand that from a distance. And also, this is a small thing that may just be a me problem because I'm really face blind, but in movies, I have a really hard time telling characters apart because movie stars all look the same. And in shows, you can't do that because everybody defines them by their clothes and their mannerisms. That's literally how it works. So obviously, that's helpful for me. And when it comes to sensory stuff, musicals are such spectacles. There's so much to look at that I honestly don't need to fidget or stim much because of it. And I don't feel the need to. I'm just looking at all the colors and all the motions and trying to follow all the words, and then, ooh, there's a song, and songs are extra sensory calming, and it's all very nice, and then I can take the songs home and I can continuously stim by listening to them and remembering this nice social experience that I had, and so I know that when I leave the theater, this experience isn't going to be done forever, so there's not that anxiety either, and overall, being in the audience of a theater is just often a very, very safe space for autistic people. So we become obsessive theater geeks, which is a non-issue in my personal opinion. I will say that sometimes the sensory input is too much for autistic people. That is a discussion for another day, specifically. It's coming. It's in my independent study. And the theater, both on stage and backstage, is also very often a safe space for autistic people because there are set rules and social scripts and norms and expectations, and you get to try on new characters and learn from their mistakes. That's also a video for another day. But now we know why autistic people love the theater, typically. Now, why are so many Broadway characters autistic coded? What is up with that? Now, we've talked before on this channel about the intersection between neurodivergency or neurodiversity and literature. But to recap the main autistic character tropes that we typically see in the media, we have the absent-minded professor, who is usually the socially awkward one who doesn't fit in, the dreamer, who is often tied into the bossy know-it-all, usually that's the softer, more femme version of the absent-minded professor. I really hate gendering things, I'm really sorry. archetypes are annoying. The one who's utterly bored and baffled by social norms, and the blank slate, aka the innocent ingenue. So that should cover Seymour from Little Shop, both Elphaba and Glinda from Wicked, Dawn from Waitress, Amelie from Amelie, every Disney princess, Matilda, literally half of Be More Chill, Evan Hansen, Horton, Jojo from Seussical, Rose in Dogfight. Leave every other one that I forgot in the comments, because there are for sure more that I've forgotten. And it's also a huge trope in stories, specifically long-form stories like plays, musicals, and films, to have a character who at the beginning feels really left out and is trying to fit in but doesn't know how or where, and eventually they do find their way to fit in. And that's a comforting narrative for autistic people, obviously. And by putting that on stage, you have to automatically make it bigger and more obvious and more grandiose, which means that the character is going to be extra awkward. They're going to be extra weird. They're going to be extra uncomfortable. So they're going to be autistic. Like, they're going to have to be autistic, whether that's written that way or not. And we see this more in theater than we do in other types of media because it is required to be larger than life. So a neurotypical version of an outcast in the head of a neurotypical writer becomes an autistic person when it hits the page a little bit, and eventually definitely on the stage, because they have to expand those pieces to make that character believable. And we also cannot forget the tortured artist trope, the idea that mental illness and art cannot exist separate from each other. That's also a thing, and also the fact that weird, awkward, outcast people tend to be artists and tend to make pieces, tend to put pieces of themselves into every character that they write. So by definition, the concentration of neurodivergent people is going to be higher in the arts. But why does this matter? Why does any of this matter? Why am I diagnosing characters? Why am I making it a point? Well, it's because there's this assumption in the theater world that autistic people cannot play allistic people, despite autistic people knowing that we've played allistic people our entire lives and we completely, for sure, have it covered. But still, this idea is super, super pervasive. And it's the reason that people like me don't get jobs. And the reason that there has never been an openly autistic person on Broadway or in a national tour. Hire me. I really should get those allergies checked out. Anyway, the thing is, though, if they aren't going to listen to us, fighting this by saying autistic people can in fact play allistic people, well, we know for sure, definitely, all people can agree that autistic people can play autistic people because we are ourselves. Most casting people don't know that, actually, because that's why Curious Incident has been such a mess in history. We're going to pretend that they know that. Assuming the casting directors know that autistic people can play autistic people, the vast majority of our most beloved lead Broadway characters are very clearly autistic or otherwise neurodivergent. And honestly, playing them NT in the past has been causing them to miss really important pieces of that character. For example, if you're familiar with the play Mackinac at all, when I played the young woman in that a year or so ago, the director and I both read the script and came up with the conclusion that, oh, she's so very autistic. And so we looked through this play through a different lens, and we got the chance to put in tics and stims and think of when she would be more burnt out, when she would have more energy. And that added so much humanity to the role that hadn't been there in other productions. My good friend Mickey Rowe, love you dude, played Mozart in Amadeus in 2020, and it's widely accepted that Mozart was autistic in real life, so Mickey put that autistic energy and perspective back into the character, and the world got to see Mozart in the more zany and delightful and just plain human light than you typically would when he's put on stage or in films. And there's an argument to be had that autistic people honestly probably make better actors than neurotypical people, because we spent our entire lives acting for survival and studying the human condition and trying to figure out how to seem natural and normal. We're not going to have that argument right now, because no, but I'm still going to throw it out there. I also find it very, 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 very likely that there are several autistic people on Broadway right now who have absolutely no idea that they're autistic. And I'm not saying that as like a, I have names, I'll wait. I'm genuinely just, I'm not up to date on Broadway things anyway. I'm saying it as a genuine statistical thing. I've been to theater school, I know a lot of people working in professional theater, and I can promise you there are so many more autistic people who are just simply being called eccentric artists in this community than anybody can count. So if we're already there, and there are roles that we would absolutely kick butt in, what's stopping us? Mostly it's people being afraid of change and afraid of needing to recognize that their own personal way of functioning is fundamentally inaccessible and needing to change that. Also, a lot of them of realizing that maybe they might also need those accommodations as well, and of the entire education system entirely steamrolling and trying to kill us before we even get the chance. The fact that I have lived through 2 separate programs when I was told that I was a burden and shouldn't be in the theater or alive is still astonishing to me, and I don't know why I keep going back. But obviously, this discussion is not going to change the world of theater forever. This video is more of an interesting analysis of the structure of media and why and how we see ourselves reflected in it as a baseline for the Broadway medley that I'm working on that will be out in a couple weeks. But I do hope that you have learned something about accessibility in the theater, and that if you or any of your friends have any say in what the future of theater looks like, whether your friend is a producer or your brother is a director or you do theater yourself, that you will try to spread this message a little bit. Because as an actor myself, I am so tired, so incredibly tired of being told what I can and cannot do by people who have absolutely no idea what I can and cannot do. Not just because, like, I need a job to survive, but also because it's dehumanizing and it's disheartening, and people should be welcome in the arts no matter what. And seeing undiagnosed, eccentric people uplifted to the top tiers of those arts, while those of us who behave and look exactly the same as that, but just happen to have a word to describe our struggles, get left behind, that hurts every single time. And the amount of times that I have thought about giving up and leaving the theater is enormous, because clearly it doesn't want me. But you see, I run solely on spite, so I'm just going to keep making theater want me until I am at the point where I have the power to completely dismantle and change the whole system. But in the meantime, thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. Sorry this ended up going in a slightly sadder direction than anybody planned. Remember, it is never too late to start over, and I look forward to seeing you, my dear, in the next one.